Varnishing is kind of one of the most mysterious concepts to artists. It's kind of like that thing that everybody knows is there and you should do, but there's kind of some mystery about how to do it. Or if you know how to do it, there may be misconceptions that you've had or even misinformation that you've had on what are actually the proper ways to do it. And in researching this episode, there were some things I found out that, thankfully not with oils, but for acrylics, until I switched to the MSA varnishes, I was doing some things wrong. So who knew? Oops. Even, yeah, well, there's so many products and they don't specify, and unless you really go to company websites and you do your own research, you may not be doing it correctly. It doesn't always say on the back of everything, each and every little step. So we're going to go over all this and dispel kind of some of the myths and the mysteries and kind of point you in the right direction. And then the after party actually offers practical video application of a lot of these products. So varnishing is important. There's some people, especially with acrylic, that say, well, I don't need to varnish. Acrylic's a modern medium. It's, durable, blah, blah, blah. You really should, because you've got multiple things that can happen. In our after party, I actually talked about somebody that I knew that had sold a piece to somebody. The piece was in a house fire. They were able to get it out, and that part of the house didn't end up burning down, but it had horrible smoke damage. With thanks to varnishing, they were able to strip the varnish off, took all the smoke and ick and all that off, and then able to revarnish it, brand new like it was when it came into their home. So they were able to save a cherished family, painting of relatives that otherwise that they would have lost had they not varnished, because they would not have been able to do anything with that otherwise. So it helps protect against environmental toxins, pollutants, dust, dirt, grime, oils from fingerprints, even UV. There's UV protection in a lot of these different varnishes that we'll talk about when we get to those. So you're not doing yourself any favors by choosing not to varnish. It's very important, and it's important that you know the difference between removable and non-removable varnish, because there are two different types. So we'll get to that and we'll discuss that. Now, kind of everybody knows that does oils, that oils take longer to dry. There's always this how long does it take oils to dry? Kind of, and it runs the gamut between different people's kind of theories on what's right and what's wrong. But did you know that acrylics also have a dry time? And this was the part that Katie and I were a little bit astonished about, weren't we, Katie?
Mm-hmm.
That we're like, acrylics aren't, like, when they're dry to the touch, they're not dry. Oh no, they're not. The first stage of acrylic varnishing is called the surface skin, right? That's the part where it becomes dry to the touch. You know how, you paint it, it has that kind of, where it feels like it's moving for a little while. You pick it up, it pulls some skin off with your finger. Well, that first stage of varnishing, the surface skin, it's the flow
Say that
of
5 times fast.
Exactly. The flow of the water towards the surface is no longer sufficient to keep that paint wet. That's that first stage, okay? It may take from a few minutes if you're painting really thin and using more water, to a full day to skin over if you're using something thick. If you've ever painted really impasto, you notice that it takes a lot longer for that surface skin to dry. It's because so much moisture is coming up from beneath from those layers. The second stage is the dry time for the entire thickness of that paint film to be completely dry, which helps with adhesion, it helps with hardness, and it helps with clarity. Clarity meaning that it doesn't have that milky fog where, your resins that are in your acrylic haven't completely cured. It brings all those colors up to the full, what they should be dry. Thin film, that might happen where you've got that, second stage of drying within a couple days. Films a 1/4 of an inch or more, and this is coming from Golden's website, okay? Golden themselves, so it's not just me pulling this out of the air. It may take months to years to completely dry, where it's gonna have a soft, a very incomplete adhesion. That's where your painting is at the most risk for being like bumped or scratched or damaged or anything like that, because it's On the top, it's got that skin, but underneath it's still squashy because it's not dried yet, okay? Now, something to consider that I thought about as I was researching this, on canvas, it's probably gonna dry quicker because you've got a little bit of, airflow coming from the back as well as the front. On a panel and stuff, that's gonna take longer if you're painting thick. So something to consider if you want to paint thick, that's gonna be a limitation if you're putting that on a panel, okay? So with some of these varnishes, you have to wait until that's completely dry. And acrylic is a very soft medium compared to oil. Once the oil, the oxygen has evaporated out of your painting, the oil leaves a really nice hard film, which protects the work. Acrylic, it doesn't do that so much. So that's something that you need to think about. Now with acrylics, there are two types of varnish. There are medium and varnish combos that everybody sees. Everybody's seen these in one way, shape, or form. There are some that are just called a varnish, and there's some that have your UVLS, which is your ultraviolet rays, protection within the varnish itself. This is a removable type. Just because it's not the studio medium in varnish doesn't mean that it's removable. Turns out in researching this, some of these Liquitex final varnishes where it's just varnish and not medium are actually not removable. So that could potentially be a problem if you need to take that off, just like those people that had the house fire. So something to know, if you don't mind that limitation of not being able to remove it, it's not that big of a deal. We had a customer call in that had used a varnish. Thankfully it was the Jerry's one. They had one of their studio assistants put the varnish on. She didn't look at it or see how they did it. They did a little thick. There were fingerprints in the varnish, and a couple days were coming up that she was delivering this artwork to the client. She calls and is in a panic. Is this removable? Is it not? She was going to take ammonia and try to take it off. Thankfully, because this is a medium and a varnish, you can paint back over it if you've used it as a varnish. So she was able to kind of scumble some color over it, hide that, hide the fingerprints that were in there. Then go ahead and put another coat over this once it was dry enough, because this is also used as a medium, so it's safe to use even if it's not that fully cured, dry time for the thin amount of acrylic, but still offers the protection. Just can't be removed, okay? So that's something to consider. If you paint in acrylics, you need to understand that. You need to research that before you pick kind of which varnish you're wanting to use. Now, the other ones like Golden makes, and we've got some of the UVLS ones here from Winsor Newton. There's also one that's for this one here. The Gloss UV Top Coat is a clear acrylic gel with UV protection. This one actually is not removable either. This was developed for, like, if you wanted to put a varnish over a G-Glaze or over prints or things like that to give it some sheen and some protection and some UV protection, but it's not a removable varnish. This is something that will give it that gloss and do that for you. I think they may make it in some other sheens as well, but it gives you kind of that ability, but it's always going to be there. It's non-removable. So that's an additional one that you can consider. All of the ones that are the UVLS are ones that you remove. They're removable with ammonia, okay? Most of the manufacturers make a gloss, a satin, a matte. If you tend to kind of like matte sometimes and gloss other times, or you want to custom control the satin so that it's a little shinier, a little more matte, you can mix those two together. Just always be very careful not to shake it up, to stir it gently, because you really need to mix that, because those matting agents will sink to the bottom and you'll get some gloss parts and then some matte parts as you varnish it, as you paint it on by hand. So those are the ones. Now, the ones like this that have the UV protection, those help protect even some of the fugitive dyes and pigment-based inks. When you look at your spray MSA varnishes, which are a mineral spirit base, which we will talk about in a little bit, that's something that you can use to protect acrylics as well. Any of the ones that are an MSA-based varnish, which is mineral spirits varnish, you can actually use over oils and acrylics. Any of these, the Liquitex, the Soluvar, any of the Golden or MSA archival varnish, the Blair, any of these ones can be used on both, which bonus, you paint in acrylics, you paint in oils, all you have to do is get one type of varnish from here on out. Even the Gamvar that Gamblin makes is a mineral spirits based varnish. They don't call themselves an MSA varnish, but it's made with their Gamsol, and then it's made with an acrylic resin, which is what an MSA varnish is. So they have their version, they just have the paint on version, okay? So something that you can use for acrylics as well. Those remove with mineral spirits. Gamsol, Gamvar, apparently, obviously is a Gamblin product, so they say Gamsol, which is mineral spirits. So all those ones are removable, reapplicable very easily. Katie, Katie's like,
there's so many.
I know. and that's why we're doing this, because it's confusing as heck. I mean, they even make, Winsor Newton even makes an artisan one, which is their water mixable oils, and it's a water mixable varnish for oils. So you can even, I mean, you can put regular varnish on it from oils. It doesn't have to be water mixable, but if you don't want the solvents or any of the,
yeah,
you've got options where it's just water based.
We've got a bunch of people asking about gouache. I was trying to look and see, that was where the confusion was. I was trying to look and see like which ones were up there.
For gouache, because for watercolor gouache, are they talking about acrylic gouache or watercolor gouache?
They did not specify.
Okay.
That was the other thing I was getting ready to
So obviously if it's an acrylic gouache, you can either use an acrylic varnish over it, or you can use one of the mineral spirits based varnishes. Now, that's going to be something that's going to be potentially an issue for you, because even though some of these varnishes are removable, you have to remember that even though it's an acrylic gouache and it's acrylic, it's still got such a low resin count that it can sometimes be lifted a little. It is not like totally waterproof like an acrylic is once you put it down. So you're going to want to take it and you're going to want to put maybe a I don't even know if you would do a workable fixative. That's something that we probably need to talk to Golden about, because that just seems like,
they're just so...
I know what I would use. I would use an MSA varnish, and I just would never probably take it off.
Yeah.
And I think I would still consider putting it under glass, because the problem with an acrylic gouache is that it's not flexible, and you want it to be framed in a way that's not going to be flexible, where somebody's going to move it around. And it should probably just be protected anyway, especially with acrylic gouache. A lot of the pigments, because gouache is designed for designers and illustrators and things like that, a lot of the pigments can be fugitive or do not have the highest light fastness rating, because they're designed for actually photography for the artwork, like illustrators, where they're architects, people that are doing something for it to be photographed and then used in that means, not necessarily always as a final artwork. So that's what I would say with that. Now, something to kind of back up and talk about that is the thing that nobody tells you is, so you've got your acrylics and you want to do your varnish, you don't just go and plunk this thing down and just slap it on, because acrylics are so soft. If you go to take this varnish up and you've not put an isolation coat or a couple isolation coats under it, you will start lifting your acrylics with the ammonia that's used to pull it up. So,
moral of the story:
how do you
practice on a little one first?
How do you do an isolation coat? Soft gel, a gloss soft gel. You take that. It's 2 parts of the soft gel, 1 part water. Okay, you mix it very, very, very well, and then you're going to put a coat on. I would say a coat on one way, a coat on another way. So at least 2 coats. You want the gloss because it's a clear sheen. You don't want matte. Even if you're going to varnish it with satin or matte or whatever, you want those colors to come up and be the brightest, truest colors that they can. This is one that we put on the video that we do the isolation coat on when we talk about it. And actually the isolation coat, I think, don't you think, Katie, because it was metallics, this one actually was metallic gouache, but because the metallics have so much more resin in it, to have the reflection of refraction of that metal sheen back, the particles being larger, it has more resin in it, and it actually made it, the isolation coat made it a little bit cloudier, I think. So I would definitely use a gloss varnish on it probably afterwards, but you can
It
see that it
flattened
was
it
a
a
little
little
bit,
bit, yeah.
yes, it did make it a little bit more matte. So you've got to do that on all of your acrylic works that you want to put that removable varnish on. That's why they make these, because people are scared. An isolation coat sounds like a big bad thing and difficult and a pain in the butt, so people tend to look at these non-removable varnishes as the answer. That I'm just going to go with that. So something to consider. So, but it's very easy. Try it on something, you know, a little something, and it's not a big deal. Mike was able to do it. If Mikey can do it, anybody can do it. that should just be our quote. Mikey likes everything.
Hey, Mikey, you like it.
Yes,
He's gonna
exactly.
kill us.
All right, so that's what we've got going on now with the MSA varnishes to be putting over your acrylics. You want to they're a little bit more permeable, obviously, than a paint-on varnish. So you're gonna have to put more coats on it because it's light. It dries much quicker, so you can do more coats faster. But you're, you know, not putting down two dedicated painted on coats that you can see really easily. So you will need to do more of it. You'll need to, you know, give it that kind of extra kick and extra protection over just the paint on waterborne varnishes. All right. Now, for watercolor, people ask all the time with the watercolor gouache and stuff. Yes.
We had a bunch of people asking questions about the isolation coat. Would
Oh,
you like
okay, back
to
it up
try
and we'll do that.
answer
Yeah,
those real
we'll
quick
address that
before
real
we go
quick.
through it?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Marilyn asked if you can varnish be used. Oh, wait, excuse me. There was lots. Well, I should just say there's lots of questions about people doing it on a textured canvas. How to get that on there correctly, the isolation coat before it. How to get it on there without like bubbles or
Okay.
to get through the texture and make sure
you're
you're
gonna
doing it
when you
right.
put this on, you want to, with any varnish, and especially if you're doing oil with the Demar varnish, you want to, when you brush it on, one coat, pull it across, leave it. If there's obvious air bubbles, keep something like a little pair of tweezers, even, you know, toothpick. It's very rare that you're going to get big ones. The way you get big ones is if you're mixing your varnish and before you go to do
You're
it,
whipping it. Yeah.
you know.
Don't whip and shake.
Yes. So if you're making that isolation coat, I would say kind of make it and let it sit for just a minute. Use your brush to kind of work it in slowly like this, not sit and stir it with a, you know, a tongue depressor or something like that, just so you're not whipping extra air all around into it. When you do it, the brush, you don't up and down it, you know, across, that pulls in extra air, put it down, lay it, and then slowly pull it. That's going to help it seep down into that fabric texture, and it's going to help, you know, slowly and on its side add, you know, it's going to go smoother, it's going to pull down more. Plus, use a varnish brush. I don't know how many people don't use a varnish brush. Varnish brushes are designed to help foil some of those mistakes that some of us make because, you know, our artwork's done. That's the fun part. Who wants to do this?
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. It's time consuming. It's annoying. I mean, we'll look at a couple varnishes in a little bit that aren't time consuming that I was like, yay, now we've got cool varnish. But it's, you know, you want to kind of skate through this quick and be done. But this is the end result of what your artwork can look like. Now, granted, if you mess it up on your final varnish and it's a removable one, you can take it back off. It's okay. But, you know, obviously you want to, especially doing an isolation coat, want to be a little more careful with it. So that's just kind of good common sense what you need to do. When we talk about the oil varnishes, we'll talk about some type that once you put that down and pull it across, you don't want to keep over brushing because you'll put brush strokes into it even with the best brush. But we'll get to that. All right. So is it okay to move on to watercolors, or is there a
one more.
Okay.
She was asking if, and I apologize, I've scrolled
No,
past and
that's fine.
didn't see
There's a
it.
lot of
If you
questions
can
that-
use a non-removable varnish as an isolation coat, and then put a removable varnish over top of it.
See,
I feel like they wouldn't chemically.
well,
separate or
because
something?
with these,
I guess it depends on
because
which
it's a
one you use.
medium and a varnish, it's going to be too soft. Now, granted, if it starts pulling it up when you're using the ammonia to remove it, at least it's not your color. It's not your paint. So I mean, you could theoretically do that. It's just that Golden recommends that soft gel because that's got a little bit more body, more resin because it's gloss. The glossier something is, usually the higher the resin is in it, and it's very clear, so it kind of unifies the sheen of your painting before you then go to pick a sheen for your final varnish, if that makes sense.
They want to see the varnish brushes now.
Pick a sheen and a sheen. Okay, well, we're getting to it. Okay, well, you know what? We could show them the one that's the best for the acrylic stuff, because we used several different brands. Now, if you're doing larger work, this works. Well, Liquitex Freestyle, this is actually specifically their varnishing brushes for large scale work. Because you don't think about it, but if you've got an artwork that's this size, you don't want to sit with a 2-hair brush or something like this and trying to work along it because it starts drying quickly. So
yeah.
This is something where it's very soft, it's very smooth, and it doesn't leave a lot of brush stroke because it's a very fine synthetic where they've really tapered the end of it nice. So this would be the perfect varnishing brush. Now, obviously, you're not going to be doing this. You lay it flat because you need it to be able to level so it fills into those cracks and crevices and all that and
Check
doesn't
your
drip.
table first.
Yes. Oh, good point. Check your table. Level. There's levels. You can buy them everywhere.
We've had that problem before.
Yes. All right. So the Raphael, the Corel series, the 291 flat, they make them from like little to larger. This was kind of a mid-sized one. This is a 2-inch. It's a little tacky right now because it accidentally got put in the oil. But it's a very good synthetic. It did a great job when we did the varnishing on the after party, so you'll get to see kind of that in motion. I can tell it was around the Gamvar because the handle's sticky. So that's a great brush. The Raphael Soft Acryl, which is this one felt just like a squirrel brush.
So
Mike
nice.
was like all geeked by it. So this is the Raphael Soft Acryl 280. And this is made for multimedia, but it's really great for really smooth application. It'd be great for glazing and things like that. But I mean, it worked perfect for varnishing. So, and that's one of the things actually on the handles, they say what you can do. Let's see. We had one more. Oh, the Liquitex long handle brush. So those are the 3 that I think from what we carry that are going to be your best bet for acrylics. A synthetic, because you don't want it to be bristle, the hairs to fall out. Plus any bristles, anything with any texture is going to show on your paint on varnishes. Now, that being said, when we did a small varnish with the polymer varnish is great. It provides great UVLS protection. It does start drying quickly, so you either have to do some practice on just some practice stuff, or even just on an extra canvas. Practice it on something, because you'd be surprised at how you start going slow and then you start trying to correct it, and I didn't match my lineup, and kind of with varnishing you paint a little bit over the side as you're doing this. If I was varnishing this, I would be painting down and going along, and then I would pick that up and I would be going right back over it just a little bit, right? So that you don't have either a seam right in between where you're trying to get them real close, or you miss a spot and go from there. So that's something where if you had a really big piece of work, I would not try to hand paint that type of a varnish on. A Gamvar or something like that, be totally into it, because that's a mineral spirit space varnish that can go on that acrylic. That's actually designed to be able to work with really large ones and not leave brush strokes. I would do a spray varnish if you're not sure and you really want something that's going to, provide a nice even cover, or if you've got something that's really got a lot of peaks and valleys and things like that, because you can do multiple coats, you can do it from kind of some different angles, and that's going to help make sure that you cover everything without that varnish pooling down in those kind of low areas of your painting, and then showing a lot of shine in some spots and not as much shine in other spots. We'll talk about the oil varnishing brush in just a minute when we get to that part. Now, watercolor, obviously, you don't want your paper out and exposed, and for long term, but now mixed media people do it all the time. Sometimes they want it just to be on something that's cradled and it to be more modern and all that. But at least if you do and you want to have it out, you can do some things to offer it some protection. It's just not going to be removable because obviously if you try to soak it with mineral spirits, it will go down in your paper eventually as that lifts that varnish. This is watercolor. We did this in-house because I talked to some watercolor artists that actually expose their paper and how they hang it and things like that. I was very curious about kind of what they did to at least give it some protection. What they do is spray it with a couple, 2-3 coats of a workable fixative, very light first. Okay, so it kind of helps that watercolor set. It kind of keeps it from lifting or from doing anything else. Then they go to the MSA based varnishes. With this one, what I used was the Soluvar because I really like the sprayer nozzle on the Soluvar. It just does a very, very fine mist for how heavy-handed I tend to be when I use a spray varnish. With those, you can do unlimited coats. So I went out, you know, and was coming in and out every 15-20 minutes, putting some good coats on it, and then just here and there I would add another coat or two if I was over here in the studio working on something. So this has where it's got like a texture to it where it's a little bit dry feeling. It feels, you can feel the varnish on it to the point that I've done it, but it gives it where if we get some dust or dirt on it, we can just take a soft cloth with like a microfiber, just go over it. It's going to at least lift the stuff off. It's not going to have soaked in. Any moisture shouldn't soak into it anymore because it's been sealed with that MSA varnish. And it really made the colors pop, don't you think, Katie? Yeah. It's got gloss, so it kind of gives it just a slight sheen that if you didn't see it before, you don't realize, but it's there. So that was how I chose to seal this watercolor work. So that is possible.
Yeah. It made the strokes and stuff on it, the little ink strokes and stuff, it really did pop everything.
Yes.
Surprisingly, actually.
Now, with this, with the MSA varnish, this one was actually done with it, too. This was, watch the after party, and we'll talk about how this was done. It was very dry and very dusty. The paint was really thinned down with mineral spirits. So there really wasn't a safe way to put a paint on final varnish on this. In my opinion, I felt without lifting up some of the pigment because of how it was painted. This is somebody's painting that I traded for years ago when I was in college. So what I chose to do with this, because it's just in my house, it's not going in a gallery or anything else, it'll always be with me, is I went ahead and put a satin, golden satin MSA varnish on this to give it just a touch of sheen because it was very flat. I think I ended up putting 5 or 6 coats on it just to get it enough kind of, can you come up close, Katie, just so they can see the little bit of shine that's on it. You can see where, because it didn't have protection, there's some scratches from over the years. Can you see the sheen on the, especially the spyglass is probably the easiest place to, on the black. There you go.
It's not cut. Oh, there you go. Okay.
So that was a way of, you know, obviously I'm not going to be able to remove that, but at least just protected for now so that it's not, you know, having Great Danes, slobber flies everywhere. It's been on the ceiling before. It's been on other paintings before, rather than, you know, there's not a safe way to clean it. So that at least is giving it some protection where slobber or something needs to be wiped off. See? Didn't know you had to slobber-proof paintings, but you do sometimes. When you do those, 9 to 12 inches from the work surface, you go over, spray, over the edge, stop, spray, stop, go over each time, so you're not stopping on the edge. A lot of people will do that, and there'll be these shiny parts just right on the edge as they go. So all the way over before you turn it off, all the way over before you turn it off. You want to shake the can 2 minutes, 2 full minutes to get all of that mixed in, especially if you've got a satin or a matte, because you've got those matting agents. If you don't get those shook up properly, you'll have some areas that are really shiny and then other areas that aren't. So consider that. Yes.
We have lots of people asking about the spray varnish if temperature matters when you do
That's what I was actually getting to. Ideally, they say 65 to 75 degrees for the can if you're going to be varnishing. That doesn't mean go out and get it from your 40-degree garage, let it sit in the house 10 minutes. You know, We'll talk about studio safety next week, so we can talk about how to properly store these inside, you know, or in an area where it's a little bit more temperature controlled so that you can use them. I mean, if you need to varnish, it's outside where it's cold, bring it in and let it sit overnight so it gets up to room temperature. For every 2 minutes that you, or every 10 seconds after every minute of use, shake. Especially if those matting agents are in your varnish, okay? So if you're going along, you know it's been a little while, give it a shake. 15 to 20 minutes minimum before recoating for each of those coats. Something on panel is going to be drier. You may need a little bit longer. If it's really cold outside or it's really humid, you're going to need a little longer. You need to use these in well-ventilated areas because they're a mineral spirits base, and then they've got the propellants for the spray. You'll see on the video, we were coughing and hacking and wheezing, and we had to do it inside where we could film.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, something to consider. Now, one of the things that they do say is if it's on a very absorbent surface and your painting's kind of matte looking, like on a canvas or something like that, where it's sunken in at all, you may want to put a couple coats of gloss varnish on it first to get everything up to a nice sheen where the color's really crisp, and then choose to go wherever you want to go from there for that. So that's almost like you're using that as an isolation coat and kind of a fixative for the work so it doesn't lift. Now, they also make a paint-on, if you like the idea of this MSA varnish, but you don't, you know, the Gamsol or the Gamvar is a paint-on. Golden makes a paint-on as well. They've got their MSA varnish. You do need to use the varnish solvent to thin it because it's more concentrated, where Gamvar, the beauty of Gamvar, it comes ready to go right out of it. Used to be a powder and a liquid, and then you'd have to mix it. Right from the get-go, you don't have to monkey with this and that, but the nice thing about that, having the thinner, that's also the remover for the varnish. So you've got that there then already where you can go, you know, from that. Now, before we go to, I guess we need to say what the time is for we talked about the isolation coat for as far as doing the paint on varnish, like you guys were asking. With that soft gel gloss for the isolation coat, it's 3 to 6 hours between your layers if you want to put several coats on for isolation. You need to have it cure a whole day before you varnish. That's 24 hours. Go the whole 24 hours before you put your final varnish on. We talked about the absorbency of the sheen dictates the isolation coats required. You want it to look kind of satiny from that isolation coat before you then, if you want to go matte or something like that, just because that will be enough isolation where it's not going to come through. Read the containers. These have to be thinned. Some of these don't have to be thinned. We covered that. Always read.
They're all so different. Just make sure you're following.
They're all very different.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we move to oil varnishes, just something to consider, and we talk about this on the final show. If I've got this and I'm varnishing it, a good thing to do is when you're done painting it on, set it on something obviously lower. Take a couple, you know, some Dixie cups or something. Have it so that it's set up on something flat and level. You're wanting to do this somewhere where there's no breeze. There's no, you know, it's one thing if it's in the house and you've got the windows open and the screens in it. You don't want it to be outside on your porch. You don't want it to be in the garage with the garage door open. You don't want it to be somewhere that leaves or bugs or things, you know, even a covered porch.
Or next to a condo building that's being built with dirt flying through the air.
Yes, yes, which is what happens here when we have to go outside to varnish with all the people with asthma. You want it to be somewhere where you can control that environment. So just obviously if it's a stinky varnish, have that room closed off from the rest of the house. Do your due diligence and, you know, use your smarts. Yeah. But have something where you've got that set. And this being said, even in the winter, you got your heater on. If you've got the vents that blow out of the ceiling or blow up, they may be near your stuff. Have this set here. Have something on the side, some other cans or some bricks or something that's slightly higher than your artwork take a larger panel, take a canvas, take anything that's flat, clean, dry, place it over it to act, that's kind of extends beyond your artwork, to act as a keep dust and things that fall down out of the air as well on there, off. Because I don't know how many times I've come back and there's dog hair and over there, the leaves, we've had all sorts of fun stuff.
Grass.
That just, keep that there until that varnish is completely dry. It'll keep you from either having to pick things out, put another coat on to try to cover up the mistake, or leave it in there, or, you know.
Or from other people coming through and going, is that, oop, that's still wet.
Yes. Actually, we should show that one now. Where do you think the one, okay, so this is a perfect reason for that. And if you're somewhere where there's gonna be other people, put a sign up, because it doesn't matter, as long as you don't put a sign, people somehow think it gives them a license to touchy touch. And we have made her very modest for Facebook, because we don't want to be caught. This is a painting that I did the Damar varnish on, put outside on a very level surface, had a level, it was fine, needed to be outside so that it wouldn't give anybody breathing problems. Was laying flat, perfect, looked great, there was no wind, nice day. Didn't put anything over it with a sign. Somebody picked it up to look at the painting. Wow, I really like that. We have a lot of people that walk around the building on breaks and such. I can see it over here
Yeah,
from
I
here.
can see it right there too.
Okay, so this is a varnish that yellows slightly over time. 3 months in, didn't really notice. Was in the closet, got it out to take it to a show, had entered in a show, it had gotten in. Open it up at the place to give it to them at the gallery, and about, you know, have an aneurysm, because there, and this goes, you can't see it, it goes all the way down the painting, and it's so obvious because now that it's yellowed, it's there. Now, great thing is this is removable varnish. Not a problem, I can take this off. Lesson learned, and now your lesson learned as well, but I'm at a show getting ready to,
What are you
here's
supposed
my
to?
messed up painting. And I was like, I need to take this home, we can't show this. And they're like, no, but that looks like you did that on purpose. No, it's not done on purpose, and I'd really not like to exhibit. Nobody's gonna know. Left it, won a best in show credit. With drippy varnish that nobody realized was drippy varnish. And I was like, oh my gosh, no. Make it go away. Now everybody will know it's been photographed with drippy varnish. So use your varnishing smarts, people. All right. So oil varnishes. Oil varnishes are somewhat easier to deal with, because guess what? They're removable. Okay, so that kind of just makes it easier right from the start. But oil dry times, one of those, is it done? Is it not done? What do you do? There's a dummy proof varnish, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, that kind of negates this and makes it so you don't have to worry about this type of stuff anymore. Thinly painted layers of oils. If your painting is super thin, super dry, had a lot of medium, things like that in it, quick dry, whatever, as little as 3 months, it may be completely dry. May be completely dry. Depending on your humidity, your dryness may make it quicker. If you live out in Arizona, it's summer, it may dry really quick. You live here and it's summer, it's like you live in a swamp. It may dry way longer. So 3 to 12 months typically for a thinly painted oil painting to dry, depending on the mediums used and depending on where you're at. Medium paint texture may dry as quickly as 6 months given those factors, but it may range 6 to 18 months depending. Okay, that also depends on the substrate you're putting it on. Obviously canvas, because it can off-gas a little in different directions, it may dry quicker, especially if it's a gesso base instead of an oil base. But it's still going to be somewhat porous and somewhat, the ability to oxidize quicker. So panel's gonna be a lot slower. Depends on if you're using a poppy seed based oil, which takes a lot longer than a linseed based oil. It has so many different variables. That's why you need to know your materials and your substrates to help you kind of guesstimate some of the drying time. Thick impasto. If you're using alkyd, like impasto mediums and you're painting thick in your dry area, it may be as fast as 6 months. Probably highly unlikely, but it's possible. It may require 12 to 24 months though, in all kind of a realistic time frame for drying. So if you're painting super thick like Picasso, or not Picasso, of Van Gogh, gosh, I'm getting the picture in my head on the wrong artist, then you may, and you live, you know, in Florida where it's swampy all the time pretty much, you're looking at a lot longer dry time than somebody who's out in, you know, the desert in Sonoma or something like that. So, so what do you do while you're waiting for that? I mean, you're stuck. You've got an oil painting. It's going to take a while to dry. It's just kind of common sense knowledge. As soon as that painting is dry to the touch, you can use a retouch varnish, okay? Retouch varnish is a varnish that is a very diluted down Damar varnish base with that Damar resin. It's going to give you some protection, but it still is thin enough where it's going to allow for that oxidation to occur underneath it. Do you put 10 coats on it to make it really glossy and give it super great protection? No, don't do that because it's not breathable. But a couple coats are fine, a couple nice thin coats. It will unify the sheen. Some people that that don't use as much oil, where you get those really flat parts of your painting and then you have super shiny parts of your painting, we use that to kind of balance them out and bring that matte sheen up to a shinier sheen. You don't want to go overboard with that though, because that can give you adhesion problems. But if you're working along, you notice on your painting there's a little bit of a sunken part, you can actually take that, give it a quick spray, let it sit overnight, and it'll help unify that sheen so it's a little easier to see your color, especially if you're working in gray values that are very similar. Sometimes that happens and you need to do that kind of quick pickup sheen thing. So retouch varnishes help for that type of a thing and help give you just a temporary protection while that painting is sitting and oxidizing and waiting and waiting and waiting for that final varnish. So at least it's better than nothing. All right, you can spray it on, you can paint it on, just kind of whatever is easier for you. So then you can do something if you don't like kind of those sunken areas, where instead of using retouch varnish, if you're still in the painting process, or as we learned and we were researching, you're getting ready to varnish something, and this one was done with a lot of mineral spirits. Now it's shiny. But back when I was in college, this is a quick painting that I did of my dog at like 3 in the morning. He sacked out on the sofa in the art building, and I just really liked how it looked, and I thought it'd be cute to do a little painting of him. Put a lot of mineral spirits in it because that's kind of how we were taught to do at the time. Katie, was this painting not as matte as it could have been when it came in? The colors were very dark and very dreary. It's student grade paint.
It was very...
But it was
blah.
very chalky and blah and everything else. Now, in reading and researching this, you don't just jump to a final varnish because the sheen's not uniform. It can take a lot of varnish coats to make that uniform, but then you go to remove it, and because it's that dry, it may actually pick up some of the paint and that matte. So Gamblin has all sorts of great educational stuff on their website. They've got a video on a process called oiling out that most people usually do with linseed oil and some either turpentine or mineral spirits. Don't use that, okay? Because then you're putting a drying oil on that's going to take a lot longer to do. Instead, and this is not a Molotov cocktail, this is, I dropped it and the plastic lid broke, so this is my redneck lid for my Gamsol, or my Galkid. You take Galkid, you take Gamsol, which is mineral spirits, you mix them together half and half. This is an alkyd-based resin, but it's got some sheen to it, but alkyds dry really fast. You paint this on, and the after party, we have Mike do it. It's a no-brainer, it's super easy. You let it set 2 to 5 minutes, and then you take a soft rag and you buff it into it, and then you look at it, and are there still sunken areas or they're not? You can either let it set, do another coat, or put some more on, see what soaks in, then buff it off. So we did 2 coats of oiling this out, came up to this great sheen, and then I put 1 coat of Gamsol on, or the Gamvar on it, in just the, I think the satin, just to see what it would look like. And it gives that much shine to it. I mean, the colors are much more rich. It's,
Totally different painting.
yeah, it's what it looked like when I painted it at 3 in the morning with too much coffee in my system. So but that protects it. So I can take that Gamvar off at any time, and it's not going to lift up that chalky paint, student grade paint that I had on there. Okay, so that's something you can do anytime that you're working on a painting. You can use that process with that product, and it's going to bring the sheen all up together. This actually offers better adhesion than if you put a whole bunch of retouch varnish on it, which are these dry, brittle layers that, if it's left on the surface over time, kind of break up and flake off. Better to do that than do this necessarily per se, and put too much on and then add a lot more paint. So better adhesion, better archival practices. Obviously it works great for under oiling out for your varnish. So there's that. Now, Damar, it's spelled different ways. Everybody pronounces it different. I don't even know if the jury's, is it just kind of a you say potato, I say potato, Katie?
I think so.
You don't want to use any of these other varnishes like that until it's completely dry, because you will have cracking. The Damar varnish soaks in, it bonds right on, it's very slick, it's very shiny, it's very beautiful. I mean, you saw on this one painting that we kind of made her more modest, it's got that beautiful bright shine to it that you like, but if you put it on a painting that's not that fully, you know, how long do I wait until my painting's done, and you put it on too soon, what's gonna happen is that's gotta go somewhere, and it goes out and it's going to crack your varnish. So, so you need to make sure that that's why you put something on it first, you know, temporary, like a retouch. If you really want that Damar varnish, do that retouch first. So that can be removed with white spirit, that can be removed with turpentine. Everybody makes a version of it. I mean, Chelsea has the lavender one, which is what we used in the studio, because that doesn't bother everybody respiratory wise without that turpentine in it. I mean, Michael Harding makes it, Winsor Newton makes a bunch of people make spray Damar varnishes. Lucas even has this, apparently if you're going to do it in bulk, it comes in this lovely 5-gallon drum of Lucas's brand. So that's what that is. And Katie, can you zoom into this?
Mm-hmm.
Mike varnished this for me. And in the video, it's very funny because it looks very flat and boring and matte, doesn't it, Katie?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, whoa, so you're giving me the crappy thing to varnish. Oh no, this turned out absolutely stunning. The colors just, I mean, that makes like jewel-like refractive tones. It's just gorgeous. And this little violet in here, and you know, all these under colors in here, just suddenly it turned back into this beautiful kind of scribbly fun, just, it's my attempt at abstract, just more for the fun of the colors. And I got in some oil sticks and just was messing around with them. So that will give you that beautiful, lovely shine. And that's with 2 coats of that, the Damar varnish. Now, you can get similar varnishes where you can get oil varnishes that are matte, besides just the Gamvar. Michael Harding does a matte varnish. It's got beeswax in it. You can see, can you zoom in on this, Katie?
Uh-huh.
It's very thick. It actually looks like paraffin wax to me.
I say it looks like coconut oil.
Yeah, oh yeah, that too. Okay, before you use this to varnish one of these beeswax based varnishes, you need to put it in hot water, in a little pan of hot water on the stove.
You double
Bring it
boil
up,
it?
not quite, well, you don't boil it, just bring it up to right under a boil. Put that in there. It needs to, it's beeswax with Portuguese turpentine. So you let that heat up, it turns clear, you apply 1 thin coat. It dries in minutes, but you want to do it really thin so it's not matting, over matting parts of your painting. So there's a final varnish like that you can use. There is a varnish like this that you can use if you don't want to do, I don't think we have that matte varnish in yet. I actually used cold wax medium because you can actually use that. It's got solvent in it, and then it's got beeswax, but it gave it this nice lustrous shine. Can you, when you get a second, can you?
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. I didn't buff it one last time before we kind of zoom in on this part here. You can see this was a very matte painting, and so much so that just if you rubbed it, you could lift the solvent and the color off of it. So I decided I would try very lightly coating it with beeswax, letting it harden, and then buffing it off so it would give kind of a nice warm sheen. Again, not for a great final varnish. This is a painting that's going to be in my house for forever, you know, that someone else did.
Somebody was actually asking about that when you mix cold wax medium and oil, how to varnish. Can you varnish over top of that?
Over the cold wax?
Like, you know, when you mix them, use them as like an oil medium?
Yes, no, you can varnish over it. That's fine. It just needs to obviously dry.
Yeah.
So, all right, mastic varnish. I didn't get one. We were out. That's something that's kind of like a pre-Cold War kind of a, you know, old Renaissance. This looks good. It's got that nice hard gloss, but it yellows slightly. It also turns milky over time. It's really easy to mess up. It's mastic resin that's pure. It's dissolved in white spirit. It's something where if you don't have, it's one thing if you've got a classical training, like Renaissance style classical training, to use some of those type of varnishes because you've been instructed on how to do it right. Not because you've heard about it and it sounds cool and it's shiny and I want shiny. Don't pick up on that and use that as your final varnish, because you can do a lot of things to make it turn a lot milkier and give it issues with your painting. So now the drawbacks to Damar, it's that beautiful, great shine that we just saw on there, and you know the shine that we saw on the other painting where it's got the drips. It tacks up really quickly. So as you're working, you have to put that brush down, drag it across, lift it up, put the brush down, kind of overlap slightly. If you see areas that are thinner and then you see areas that are thicker, you want to finish that and figure that out on your next coat. You don't want to do anything with it. You don't want to go back and overbrush, because that Damar resin picks up brush strokes really, really fast. So again, this is a varnish that if you're dead set on using it, spray varnish for the big paintings, okay? Because it's going to be a problem otherwise. 1 to 3 thin coats instead of 1 thick coat. Pop bubbles if you find them. It's more viscous, so I've never had a problem with a lot of bubbles. But it is because it levels really well. The flat surface is a big biggie with it. Now, amber varnish. It's like, what?
It's so small.
Can you really? Well, it's very thick. This can be used as a painting medium as well as a varnish. This is something that doesn't need to be removed because it's this beautiful resin. It protects it very well. This is 36% Baltic Sea amber, 36% poppy seed oil, and 28% turpentine. All in this tiny little itty bitty that comes in a cute,
It's so cute.
A cute little box. This can actually be done. It's a classic varnish that can be done when the painting is dry to the touch, because the amber actually naturally contracts, just like the oil paint does, as it dries. So it's one of those points where you can use a very traditional varnish with it as you paint. It dries, you mix it with solvent and brush it on. I would say research proper application, because in looking at it, there's all sorts of different recipes. You want to talk to somebody that has used it before and get really good advice for that. With this, you actually scrub it into your painting like the Gamvar that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. You set it out in the sunshine for an hour to help it level and set. Obviously not when it's 100 degrees, but when it's, you know, a nice, you know, spring day, obviously put something over it where it's not going to get a lot of gook in it, and then bring it in to dry overnight. 2 coats offer complete protection with this, right from when it's still dry to the touch. Another way around that is if you use amber painting medium in your painting as you paint, you don't need to varnish, because that actually offers that same protection.
That's why you like it.
Oh, yes, that is why I like it. Yes.
Question. From Patty Sheldon.
Okay.
She wants to know if you've already painted and it's an acrylic
Uh-huh.
painting. If it's already dusty, what would she do to clean that before varnishing?
Not a tack cloth or something that's got anything gummy in it. Just like the
Like the screen cleaning cloths that you do,
even like the ones you use in your car for dusting.
microfiber?
Oh,
that are the
microfiber.
microfiber. Just if it's got a lot of texture, go very slow over it and rub very gently, because remember, acrylic is very soft, but that helps pick up stuff in those fibers without depositing anything in return. I've seen people take Windex and which
No,
that's ammonia, but
No.
that's for removing varnish, not half your painting. So yes, so something like a microfiber cloth or something like that is ideal for doing that with. Okay, so the dummy varnish.
Oh.
Was it not dummy proof?
It,
This Gamvar,
it's
which
still, it's like one of those things that's too good to be true. Like,
Yes.
it's still like, are you sure you didn't do something wrong when we did that?
it slices, it dices,
Yeah.
it cuts through cans. It is like the old Ginzu knife commercials
Yeah.
to me. It's the Ginzu knife of varnish. it can do everything. It comes in. You're laughing. It can. It comes in your gloss, your satin, your matte. Obviously, with more of them than larger sizes than these. I just got smaller. Had I known how much I was going to like it, we would have gotten the industrial size. With these, they actually say with the satin and the matte to shake them vigorously before you varnish.
Bubbles.
But remember how you apply it.
Yeah. You're gonna
It's
get
not
bubbles
gonna,
anyway.
You can keep it. It's not going to
Yeah.
do anything. Yes. So I watched the video online and I was just like, what? You use just a regular bristle brush. I did get the the Raphael Oleo, which is a very high quality hog bristle brush that's made well, that's not going to shed, but it's still a hog bristle brush. And this is the painting that we actually did this with. You pour it into your cup or whatever. Just get the excess off, and when you put it down, you actually scrub the painting, and you scrub it into all the nooks and crannies of your painting. This can be done as soon as your entire painting is, pushing gently with a thumbnail on the thickest part of your painting. As long as it's firm and it doesn't give in, you can do this whenever as a final varnish. No need to wait for, 12 months or whatever, and it offers the protection, and it's a final varnish. And you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I'm pulling it across.
Yeah.
There's brush strokes. Oh my gosh, it's tacking up. It's sticky. I'm going to have to go back over with another coat, and then that one doesn't work, and another coat, and then remove it, and then try it again. You're scrubbing into the painting here and there. If it starts pooling, you take it and blot it out on a rag, and you use that to seep up some of the excess, and you keep scrubbing. When you watch the after party, you're going to be like...
It stresses me out thinking about it.
It's witchcraft. It's just plain and simple sorcery. It's sorcery. It's like how much we like the Liquitex Soluvar MSA varnish. It's the paint-on version of this that gives you this beautiful sheen. Come up close, because I've done 2 coats with that scratchy, scrumbly, scrubby. Other than dust from the studio in here, from just since we did the varnishing episode, which has been a while, look at how even that sheen is. You cannot see brush strokes. You cannot see anything. It unifies it. I use gloss because I just wanted to see what it would look like, because gloss is the easiest way to tell if you've got brush strokes in something and you mess it up. You can always see it in the gloss. It's dummy proof. It's varnishing for dummies. And then the more exciting part of it is, so my brush is done, what do I do with it? You set it somewhere that's not dusty with the varnish. I mean, you wipe out a little excess with your rag, and you forget about it. It can just sit there until the end of time, or you're ready to do Gamvar again, whichever comes first. Same brush, because what it does is it just reactivates that when it gets back in the varnish, ready to go the next time. You don't even have to clean the brush. You seem very skeptical.
It's still
Corinne's very skeptical.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Okay, so you can tell I'm excited about it. So that's what you use for that. Now, I think the patent, Katie and I were talking, the patent must have expired on it. Weber makes a Sinvar varnish version of it. They make a matte varnish version of it. Other brands are coming out on the market with similar ones. Oh, that's Retouch. There's a couple other companies that have the exact same thing. So that's something that's the paint-on kind of version of the MSA that you can just like have a go with. It's wonderful. So, and even better, works on oils, alkyds, and acrylics. Again, it's the only varnish you ever need, and it's fine to use on those great big paintings because you're scrubbing, you're not worrying about leaving brush strokes, so it stays open for so much longer than like the other varnishes do, that you can start and keep kind of working your way and going, and it's not going to affect the painting. So, Gamvar for the win!
Yeah.
It's very awesome. You know me, I get very excited about something that I'm just like, wow, this is...
Where has this been all my life?
Yes, that's amazing. So, now the kind of other thing that we've got that we carry that, this was the brush we used for doing the Demar varnish. The Soft and Mighty glazing and varnishing brush. It's super smooth. It's just like any varnishing brush.
Stuck it in the
Well, any varnishing brush, even after you clean it out, it's got some residue, so it's never like what it looked like when you first got the brush. Once you go to put it back in the varnish and paint, the turpentine or whatever the solvent is reactivates it, and it's fine. Very soft, very smooth, natural hair brush. This ferrule is a welded nickel ferrule with vulcanized rubber underneath, so you can actually let it sit in solvent to clean it out.
Oh.
It's a varnishing brush, a super crazy high quality varnishing brush to be used with the high end oil varnishes, more the classic oil varnishes. This would be too soft to be using with that Gamvar. You need something you can scrub, so you need those hog bristle brushes, which is great because hog bristle brushes are much cheaper for use than this is a very pricey brush. But if you were going to do that traditional type of varnishing, I was amazed. I've never had a varnishing brush that I've used that has been this nice. So, and with that short handle, it's very easy to manipulate it and move it. So, varnishing cleaners. They make Winsor Newton makes an acrylic varnishing remover. So that's probably your ammonia, essentially, that you can remove your removable acrylic varnishes with. Weber makes these. They make a cleaning and conditioning solution. And then they make that cleans your varnish off and conditions your painting. They actually make a salamander product that is used to renew the color brilliance of oil and alkyd paintings after removal of an aged varnish film. So I'd imagine this does like an oiling out almost to underneath, since areas can get flat and, you know, depending on kind of, I'm sure there's no way you can get all the varnish off equally from everywhere. So this kind of brings it all back to a nice sheen before you put another coat of a final varnish on. So those exist, they're out there. Then kind of the last thing on the list is the Envirotex Light Pour On. And this is something that can go on oils, it can go on acrylics, alkyds, kind of whatever you want. The directions are quite extensive. Printed them off from their website. This is really stinky because it's a resin. It's 2 parts. It's dangerous. You want to use it with safety gear. You want gloves. You want the whole 9 yards. You have to use a flat bottom cup, and when you use it, you actually have to stir very vigorously. They say in a whisking motion to activate it and do all that. And I'm really thinking the more that we've got this out, the more I don't know if I really feel comfortable doing it. We've got a lot of stuff here that's going to take a while. If maybe we can, in the next couple days, just go live and do a quick one later in the week, and do it. And that will give us some time. Maybe we could do a couple different mediums with it in a small version to be able to see what it looks like, because it does provide just it's like 50 coats of varnish in one. It's not like, removable.
Bar top or basketball floors or
Well, one of the things on there, zoom in on this, is a table made of pennies. Oh yeah, I've seen where
so cool.
Where they've put it in resin, but it's because when you're pouring it, that's what it's like. So, so we'll come on and we'll do that where we can either maybe do it outside or we can get an exhaust fan going and
We could do outside or something.
yeah, because just it's I don't want us to be exposed to that right now. But you really have to follow the directions with this. This is it has to be done in a certain way. However, when I've seen it used properly, it is dynamite. It's just really beautiful. And you can obviously get it in much larger containers than this. This is just the really small version. So that's something that we'll do later in the week. And another good reason to be part of our online private artist group is we will alert you when we've got stuff like that, and we can post it right to that as well. So so this is kind of what the gamut runs. I mean, there's way more products. Every brand makes a version of some sort of varnish for their particular paint or product. So just do your reading. If you're not sure, go online, ask questions, search, talk to people that when you see artwork that you like and the varnish job looks great, there's no harm in talking to somebody to see kind of what it is that they're using. Maybe it's something that would work ideally for what you're doing, maybe not, but it's a better way to kind of know what applies to you and what you're trying to do with your work and the best way to protect your work. Weber makes a little DVD video that we've got on the list for the teacher's cart, the JL43. You can put that in a search bar. That'll pull up the cart full of all the items that we've shown. If you saw something, you were curious about it.
Corinne's got links in the comments
Okay,
too.
thank you. There's this little DVD, and that gives you, it's oil mediums and their uses. So it kind of, for what they sell, is kind of a version of this is used for this is used for that. And I believe that they show you how to use them. So that's something if you're really new to this and we still haven't kind of dispelled some myths and made you a little less scared to finally varnish your work, this may be helpful. If you're interested in the Gamvar, their website is incredibly helpful. They have videos on all of it. Our after party, we show you how to use each of these different varieties of varnish up front.
I would say it's in 4K too, so it's the super close up. You can see exactly how Amy applies it.
Yes, because here we don't have, and that's why sometimes we don't, we can only demo so much that you can really see really well. It's all in 4K, especially Mike's reactions. they're in 4K when he's
it's a little scary. It's a little stressful. Not gonna lie, varnishing is a little.
Oh no, I completely agree.
You spend all that time on your painting, and finally, and then you're like,
all that time, and then this happens because somebody picks it up. I mean, that was one of those things where I thought I had all the elements controlled, and then ta-da, somebody's a dummy and had to move something. So you get something like that, then it's very exciting and very dummy proof in the application. So I know it was a lot. It was highly technical. There were a whole lot of different things that we covered. If you didn't get a question, are there any other questions that you can think of? If we don't answer them, put questions in the comments. I will go back through and I will check and I will answer.
Was there anything?
Yeah, there were actually a few.
Okay.
Someone did ask if the resin will yellow over time.
It supposedly doesn't. But then again, that's, I don't know how much they've tested something like this for.
I think it depends on what you use it for. I think a lot of times, like with bars and tabletops and stuff like that, one of the reasons it yellows is people use cleaners and things on them.
Yes. Because that may yellow the top layers and not the bottom layers. Which is
not going to happen if you're using it on the wall with art.
But just consider that if you're doing something that's really, you need it to be archival and you're selling something really high dollar, this probably isn't going to offer you, just because it's thick doesn't mean it offers you the UV protection of what some of these other things do over time. And if you don't know the light fastnesses of the paints you're working with, this is giving you some options as far as making it slow that, breakdown of your color, your pigments. If you're using something with dyes instead of pigments, that gives you the best kind of protection that's afforded as a product for helping you with that. Something to definitely consider.
You may have said this already, but does the Gamvar have a strong smell?
It is odorless and water clear. Like, we couldn't even believe it. It looked like we were painting water on something. It doesn't have a thick body to it, or...
They'll take safety precautions, but...
Oh, yeah, because it's an odorless mineral spirit. Gamvar is an odorless mineral spirit. But the way that they do this takes out, they take out the most of any of the, you know, fumes that are toxic that you might not be able to smell. It's not like natural gas where the smell's in there to remind you to limit your exposure. They are one of the best at taking out as many. This is, my son's painting professor insisted that they have odorless mineral spirits. Everybody else showed up with the cans that are the ones you get at the hardware store that aren't even the artist quality. This is what I sent to him because if he couldn't use the Chelsea stuff, this was the next safest. Yes. Any other questions that you saw? Okay, so just leave them. We'll answer them. And thank you guys so much for being so understanding with us being out. It's not something we're gonna make a habit of. It's something that really hurt me to be able to do, but it was just
necessary.
It was necessary. And these guys did not need to have the flu that I had because it was a very dangerous strain, clearly, that my brother had caught. So, so if, you know, rest and recovery, Tamiflu, if you feel like you're getting it, that really helps. It limited it, shortened it very quickly. And in my brother's case, in retrospect, a $300 out-of-pocket office visit to the doctor and getting Tamiflu would have been a lot cheaper than what he's going to be, you know, faced with now. He does have health insurance, but, you know, has a very high deductible. So take care of yourselves out there. Because there's more than just art supplies that can impact your health this time of year. But thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart. You guys were awesome and checking in on me and, you know, worrying about my brother and all the prayers and love and concern was just really, it really touched me. So thank you. That being said, based on all of this, now we need to know some more about safety.
Yeah.
because we've shown you all sorts of fun chemical things. So next week we're going to be talking about the safety products that Jerry's offers, but even beyond that, we're going to be talking about some of the safety storage things. These can be flammable things. People's houses can burn down from spontaneous combustion. We're going to discuss. I've got a couple different friends who are firefighters. One I believe is a fire inspector as well. They've sent me how they recommend to people that you store solvents and things like that to keep things from going boom. It's something that doesn't happen that often, but it does happen, and it's not worth, you know, playing the safety lottery on. So that's why we're going to be talking about that next week, and we will see you then. You guys take care. Our list up through mid-March, I think, is up online. If you do the search word Jerry's Live on our website, it'll show all the different things that we have coming up, so you kind of can see what's there, what's in store. And we will catch you next week. Follow me on Instagram at Amy Gardner Dean, or also on Facebook. And again, join our Facebook Live private group. It's lots of fun, and people are really awesome there. Lots of good support and friendships being made. So
that's my favorite.
Yes, it is. It's very cool. So you guys take care, and we will see you next week.